Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Richard Nixon Presidential Library. I'm Jim Byron with the Richard Nixon Foundation, and you guys are in for a very special treat tonight. But before I introduce Mrs. Pickens to you, I'd like you to know about some upcoming events of ours that I'm sure you're going to be very interested in. Tomorrow night, right here, we're going to host Vice President Dick Cheney, and there are still some tickets available. So head on out to the museum store where you can get them, or you can also get them online, www.nixonfoundation.org. If you haven't seen it already, it's definitely worth a look. Our brand new special holiday spectacular exhibit, Trains, Trees, and Traditions, which is right out in the front lobby. It's going to be going until January 5th, so if you haven't seen it, go take a look. On January 9th, we're going to host radio star Hugh Hewitt. You know him, you've heard him, and he will be here signing books. His new book called The Happiest Life, which is a wonderful self-help guide that every single one of you should definitely check out. And on January 11th, we are going to celebrate and commemorate the anniversary of President Nixon's 101st birthday, right here with a formal wreath laying with a wreath from President Obama. Now, our guest tonight is a noted White House social expert, an event planner, and a well-known historian. Her book that she'll be speaking on tonight, Christmas at the White House, right here, was the first major book to document the Christmas traditions of the first families. And she takes special note of Mrs. Nixon's many fun and festive holiday traditions that continue to this day. She's been featured on Fox News and on media outlets around the country. She was actively involved in the Texas Historical Records Advisory Board and Southern Methodist University, now home to the George W. Bush Presidential Library. And we are very pleased to have her with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jennifer Pickens.
Well, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here at this wonderful Presidential Library. And I'm just so glad to be here today. So, Christmas at the White House. A lot of people have asked why would one write a book on Christmas at the White House? And I have to say it's pretty personal. I feel very lucky. I was a pretty spoiled little girl at Christmas time, and the fact that my mom would put up 9 Christmas trees every year. And so in 2004, I was lucky enough to be a guest at the White House at a holiday party. And I was just absolutely blown away by how beautiful, obviously, the White House is, but especially at Christmas time. And so the next morning, I went to go buy a book on the subject, and there wasn't one. The White House is such a great way to study American history. The home is roughly as old as our nation, and so it really is a great metaphor for our country and the things that are going on during the time. So when you think about Christmas in America, the early beginning of our republic, it was very much a family event. It was celebrated with friends and family, not all the big decorations we see today. And so roughly at the end of the 1800s, we start having the first Christmas trees. And so it makes sense that President Harrison was the first to have a Christmas tree at the White House. But I decided to start the book with First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. Mrs. Kennedy was the first lady to elect to put a tree up in the Blue Room. When we think about Mrs. Kennedy, we often think about her children, and Caroline loved the Nutcracker Ballet. So it makes sense that her first tree in 1961 was celebrating the Nutcracker Suite. Now the reason really she came up with the theme was just to celebrate her children. It wasn't a big deal in the papers, it wasn't a big deal in the media that they had this Christmas tree that had a theme, but it was something that caught on and every single First Lady has done since. What was a big deal during the Kennedy administration, there we see that wonderful picture of Caroline the first time she sees the tree. What we did, the media did pick up on, was that Mrs. Kennedy elected to have a wonderful museum-style creche or nativity during her tenure at the White House. This was a creche that you can see. What made it so spectacular for the media was both its museum quality, that it was a wonderful historic creche, but also its placement. She put it in the East Room between the portraits of George and Martha Washington, and the media really did go wild about it. There had been creches before We know the Roosevelts had some, as well as many other first families, but this is the one that was really prominently displayed for the first time. As we know, and here you can see, a close-up of the crush, as it is on display now in Buffalo, New York. As we know, her time was cut short during the White House, and the Johnsons entered. Following a 30-day period of mourning at the White House, when it was completely draped in black, Mrs. Johnson did go ahead and put up Christmas trees that first year, and she also did put up the crush that Mrs. Kennedy had put on loan at the White House the previous 2 years. She decided to put that out on display again. And Mrs. Johnson did a lot during her time as First Lady celebrating Christmas. Really, there's a lot to be thankful for to Mrs. Johnson of many of the Christmas tree traditions we have today. First was this wonderful, spectacular blue room tree that we've been talking about, that Mrs. Kennedy was the first one to put up in the blue room. Mrs. Johnson, before Mrs. Johnson's tenure, really, Christmas trees on display at the White House would be from a staffer's home. They might just be somewhere nearby. A staffer might donate one out of their yard, which was often quite common. But Mrs. Johnson decided we really needed to have a system to find these beautiful trees. So the National Christmas Tree Growers Association and Mrs. Johnson together started having a contest. There'd be a statewide contest, and the winner from each state would enter into a national contest. But this isn't any tree that enters the White House for the Blue Room. So when all of us are kind of getting stressed out about putting up our Christmas decorations, we need to think about the Blue Room tree. It is 18.5 feet tall at a minimum. It has to be perfectly straight and symmetrical. It has to be full, but it can't be too full because it has to fit through the front doors of the White House. And it has to be stately and both rich in color. It takes an estimate, an estimated 4,500 to 8,000 lights for that one singular tree. It's amazing. It takes roughly 12 to 20 years to grow. And so as you can see, it was a big fanfare ceremony when the winner comes to the White House and presents their tree. Second, Mrs. Johnson, after starting this wonderful selection process for a Christmas tree, she really did also secure a permanent crush or nativity to always be on display. She loved the one that had been on loan for the past couple of years to the White House, but it was a loan, and so she, with the help of Jane Engelhart and her foundation, secured this beautiful crush. A fun little side note here in this photograph, next to Mrs. Engelhart, the lady with the brunette hair, is Annette Reed. Not too long after this photograph was taken, she married Oscar de la Renta. So, and as we know, Oscar de la Renta has designed many gowns for first families, so this couple has had quite the impact on the White House. It's a beautiful crush. This is how it was displayed the first several years, but you could see it was a very cumbersome display. It took up a lot of room in the East Room. They displayed it at the same place Mrs. Kennedy had selected. But every time there was a big function during the holidays at the White House, the entire display had to come down because it was so cumbersome. So Mrs. Ford went to Mrs. Engelhart and asked for some more funds to create a new display that they could easily put in that recess between the two portraits. Sadly, Mrs. Ford did not get to see her project completed, but Mrs. Carter did continue it and said during her first year at Christmas, you can see this is the new way the crush was displayed. Several years later, Secretary Clinton, as First Lady, noted that the crush started to appear a little out of date, and she really wanted to have each piece individually restored. So they went, and this is how you can see it today, and it is just spectacular. There's several things that make it very unique, especially the fact that you can see they're on horses as opposed to camels. That really does put the White House crush as a unique piece as opposed to many others. Mrs. Nixon, who I know you all are all such big fans of here, one of my favorite things studying doing the research for this book and studying about it was the wonderful saying from historians. Dolly Madison saved George Washington, but Patricia Nixon saved Dolly Madison. And what they're referring to are the fact that Patricia Nixon did so much for the White House. She secured over 600 artifacts during her time. The White House went from being about 1/3 antiques and historically furnished. By the time the Nixons left, it was 2/3. No administration has had a greater impact on the White House than the Nixons. Really, today's White House could be a set for a Nixon movie. And she not only loved the house, but she loved Christmas. In 1969, a Times reporter observed, "Few presidential couples have gone at the Christmas time merrymaking with quite the gusto of Richard and Pat Nixon. For the holidays, they have peopled the place with choirs, Bob Hope, the Apollo 12 astronauts, and more than 6,000 other Americans, renowned and unknown. To fuel those guests, the kitchens turned out 25,000 cookies, 1,130 gallons of fruit punch, an identical quantity of eggnog. Nobody in Washington can remember a more festive White House Christmas." And she really created more traditions that you can see today than most first ladies. Here's a great photo of them out in the snow. And here you can see the Apollo 12 astronauts. But this beautiful tree you can see out in the East Foyer, Mrs. Nixon did pull the Christmas tree out of the Blue Room just one year during her tenure at the White House. She wanted it so when people were driving home on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue could see it through the windows. But the first thing she did that was so great, she wanted to really represent the entire country while she was there. So she had, with the help of Saks Fifth Avenue, these beautiful velvet balls created representing each state. You can see they'd have the state flowers and gemstones and other things representing all of our states and territories. And these are one of the only ornaments to ever remain at the White House and remain on the tree for every administration after Patricia Nixon's, all the way through the Clinton administration in their final year. Due to the wear of the ornaments now, they're rarely put out. However, the First Ladies have carried on her tradition for the most part by always representing the entire country. Second, you have the display of this wonderful gingerbread house. The media did not realize what a big deal it was going to become to have a gingerbread house. But Mrs. Nixon had, with the help of Hans Roffert, this wonderful gingerbread house put on display in the state dining room. It became so popular, it required a Marine Guard to be posted in order to continue leaving it out on display because little hands were quick to take off pieces. And it really is probably one of the most anticipated events during the holidays today. Next would be her poinsettia trees. She is famous for creating these wonderful trees full of poinsettias, primarily in red. The media went wild with these. About every magazine in the country was trying to figure out how she displayed them. And you can see here an example of how they would be telling you to make one at home. And another thing that you'll still see at the White House if you're to go today are these wonderful poinsettia trees. Another thing that we don't really have a photograph of, but she also started the idea of collecting prior administrations' Christmas cards. If you were to go on a tour of White House today, when you enter through the East Visitors entrance, the first colonnade you go down, the entire wall on the right-hand side are shadow boxes full of prior administration's Christmas cards. That was started by Mrs. Nixon. They're the same boxes that she created then. And finally, the candlelight tours. Mrs. Nixon really opened up the home to almost a larger number of people than any First Lady before her. She started tours especially for the blind where they could come in and touch the fabrics, touch the curtains. She had brochures printed in other languages so people from foreign countries could come through and read about the White House. She had wheelchair ramps installed so that people with disabilities could get through. And her impact on just opening up to the tours is really it had never happened like that before. And she realized in the evening time, it would be such a great time to open up the doors to the White House. Men could come after work during those days. She saw lots of women coming through the day and not as many men. And she did it by candlelight. They became so popular that during the Clinton administration, it was estimated 125,000 people were going through, as primarily that last week of December. And people would have to wait in line almost up to 3 hours for a candlelight tour. It's a wonderful tradition that's still going on today. And then my favorite story from the Nixon administration is this photograph. This is one of the most requested photographs, White House photos during the Nixon administration. It's of their 3 pets in front of the tree. And most of the time, the newspapers would say the private residence tree of the Nixons. Tricia Nixon Cox wanted me to always remind people that was the dog's tree. They had another tree in the private residence, but Mrs. Nixon loved to celebrate Christmas. Even with the pets, they had their own stockings and their own Christmas tree. Probably if I could go back in time and visit maybe 5 or 10 favorite Christmases, one of them would certainly be during the Ford administration. Mrs. Ford loved American history. She loved taking her children to Williamsburg. And so her second Christmas at the White House, she reached out to Colonial Williamsburg and had an old-fashioned Christmas in America. It was really special. You could see lots of handmade crafts that were created by both employees and volunteers at Colonial Williamsburg. And it really represented the Christmases of the 1800s. The museum there in Williamsburg rented out all of their artifacts. So here you can see these wonderful dolls, rocking horses, everything on loan from the museum. And probably one of the neatest things, they lended 10 portraits of children by early American artists that were on display throughout the Blue Room. Here's some of the portraits close up. Lining the halls of the Grand Foyer, you would see wonderful pieces from carousels, figures. It was just really a special Christmas at the White House. And one of her lasting traditions at the White House is the cranberry tree. And this took a while to figure out which administration had the first one, but it was Mrs. Ford from 1975. And this cranberry tree was a favorite for many, many first ladies, especially Nancy Reagan. They became so popular, they actually made 2 each season. One went in the refrigerator, so if the first one started to go bad, they could replace it. It takes approximately 200 cranberries to make this cranberry tree. And it continued all the way through the first year of the Obama administration. And it was always placed in the Red Room. Mrs. Carter, she, as all the first ladies before her, also loved Christmas. And the president loved helping making the Christmas decoration decisions. Not often would I find that presidents were very involved, but President Carter was as involved as anybody else in the staff in deciding what the Christmas decor would be. For her first year, Mrs. Carter was very involved in mental health as her time as First Lady of Georgia. So when she went to the White House, her first Christmas, she really wanted to celebrate the mentally challenged and show everything that they could do and contribute. So sort of following in Mrs. Nixon's steps of representing the whole country, she reached out to different community organizations with mentally challenged people throughout the country and had them create ornaments and have them sent to the White House. And then she had a special tour for them to come through as the opening party, which was really special. She had a little bit of a different look during her tenure as First Lady. The next couple of years, you see, instead of the traditional reds you would see at the White House, you saw a lot of pinks and roses and different colors that were on display. She continued the gingerbread tradition as every First Lady since Patricia Nixon, and she also continued the poinsettia trees. And again, you can see her final Christmas at the White House, very Victorian, very pink, and very rose, and all these wonderful different dolls were created to be on display at the White House. Her lasting legacy is really the holiday tour guide booklet. If you were, again, to go on to tour today, you'd be given a little bitty small booklet, sort of just talking about all the artisans that would contribute to the White House and what the decorations would be in each room. She had its original piece. It was just a little piece of paper folded in half that would list some of the people that would come either perform or create something for the White House. And she sort of started that wonderful tradition that has become a favorite holiday keepsake for everyone that goes on tour. The Reagan years, really, Mrs. Reagan just took everything at the White House to a whole new level. Really, it's amazing. Her Christmas decorations, when you talk to staff that worked for Mrs. Reagan, they said every year she would say, "I'd like a few more trees." And you can tell, it was absolutely beautiful and breathtaking. She especially loved flock trees. She loved to have the snow throughout the White House, so you can see. And it really did have that element of Hollywood to it. They knew how they wanted it done, and they had it executed perfectly. She loved an old-fashioned tradition in Christmas, so those were typically the decor. But when you think about Nancy Reagan, you can't help but think of the Just Say No campaign. And I know in today's world where you see actresses tending to go in and out of rehab daily, it's not as big of a to-do, but really during Mrs. Reagan's time, drug addiction was a very big deal. And a lot of people, it had a lot of social connotations with it, and she really wanted to address that. So she would have her favorite rehabilitation program, Second Genesis, come to the White House for about a week before Christmas in the building next door. They would help create many of the ornaments she needed, and she would spend hours with them hanging them up on the tree. And when you read the letters from people saying how much that meant to them, that after they had recovered from their addiction, that they could still contribute to things like at the White House, it really brings tears to your eyes. It was wonderful. The second thing that she started as a tradition at the White House was the White House Historical Association's ornament. It's the most successful ornament campaign throughout the world. They have one every year as a fundraiser, and she was the first lady to elect to put it on the tree, talk about it during her media tours, and they're most grateful, and she really helped it become what it is today. Again, you can see a close-up of these beautiful trees she would trim. She also opened up the White House to, being from Dallas, Texas, you can't help but put J.R. Ewing, Larry Hagman, on. But she really did want to open up the White House again like Mrs. Nixon did to so many people. And she obviously one of the best ways to do that is through TV. So she would have a wonderful, huge event with the media. She always had a special Santa come to get the media's attention to come in, dressed up as Santa Claus. She even had Mr. T one year. So it really made it a spectacular event. She continued the gingerbread house, but in true fashion of Mrs. Reagan, she wanted it bigger, wanted it a little more personal. So the gingerbread house starts getting bigger and bigger every year, and if you look really closely, you can see a special path to that gingerbread house. And if you look up in the chimney, you can see the jelly beans as a nod to President Reagan's favorite candy. You can also see a little personalized dog house there on the left that spells out Rex for their dog. Really personalizing it. Again, look at this poinsettia trees. This is when you enter the White House through the east entrance, and she took the decor out of the staterooms into every wing of the White House. 1988, when you were to talk to people in Washington, D.C., what was your favorite Christmas? Probably 8 out of 10 times they'll bring up 1988, an old-fashioned Christmas. Roland Mesnier, the White House pastry chef for several decades, said, "I felt as if I needed to put on a coat the first time I walked through the room. I actually got a chill. It was just like walking through a winter park." And it really was just absolutely spectacular. You can see Mrs. Reagan just has come home from Camp David to the White House and has seen the decor finished. William Seal, a White House historian, wrote, "The last Reagan Christmas reminded me of the old movies. It was beautiful and most loved by the public. The Reagans," he added, "knew how to succeed. They wanted it done and done right, and they would plan it out and execute it perfectly." And there we see, and this is one of Mrs. Reagan's favorite photographs during the holidays, and what most people don't realize, that Santa is President Reagan. I love some of these images from the Bush administration. I think what I love most about them is you see their grandchildren. So you think about President and Mrs. Bush, and you can't help think about the large family they have. And here you can see all the children. Those gingerbread cookies were made by a friend of President Bush's, and if you were ever to be in the Oval Office having a meeting, he would always give you a cookie. And here you can see him reading to the grandchildren at Camp David. That is during the volunteers when they came. The grandchildren one year were supposed to go to Camp David, and the weather didn't pan out, so they got to help put up the Christmas decorations over the weekend. Again, one of those top 5 Christmases, if you could go back and visit. Oh, I guess we're going to start with a storybook Christmas. I'm sorry. When you think about Barbara Bush, you also think about her literacy campaign. And she was the first lady that wanted to really put that theme on the tree itself. So for her first Christmas in 1989, she had these wonderful storybook characters created that were hung on the branches. And the tree skirt that year was actually a skirt of books and literacy. Really, it sort of said the Christmas created a social message that year, which was wonderful. She, like Mrs. Reagan, loved the flock trees. They were throughout the house. And she used traditional colors of red. Here you see their tree at Camp David with blocks spelling out George and Barbara at the bottom. And here we're going back to what I was referring to, one of those top 5 Christmases, 1991, a needlepoint Christmas. When they were elected as president and first lady, their church in St. Martin's in Houston, Texas, President-elect Mrs. Bush with a gift. It was a needlepoint crush. It was a 45-piece nativity It had the traditional nativity figures, but it also had an armadillo, the Bush's spaniel named Millie, a black sheep named Santley, and a wise man wearing a crown made from the cap of a Crown Royal bottle. This labor-intensive gift, with Mrs. Bush pronounced the most beautiful thing you've ever laid your eyes on, inspired her 1991 Christmas. She went to the Saintly Stitchers and some other volunteers and asked if they could have a Christmas sort of in honor of this wonderful nativity scene. And there was, here you see a close-up of it in the private residence, her first Christmas. And the result was absolutely spectacular. It took 18 months or 150,000 hours to create 1,370 needlepoint ornaments to cover this noble fur. At the base was a needlepoint village. Oh, here you see Mrs. Bush made a couple ornaments herself. There's her dog Millie. And she made Raggedy Ann and Andy for the tree. Here at the base of the tree, you can see it has a working freight train marked Houston and Washington, D.C., as well as 82 turn-of-the-century houses, churches, and other structures, all made out of needlepoint. It was absolutely spectacular. It also included a 92-piece Noah's Ark. It was a typical Noah's Ark with elephants, monkeys, and alligators, but it also included a pair of quail in honor of the vice president, and some other fun ones. This would mark the 23rd and final gingerbread house made by Hans Roffert, who Mrs. Nixon hired. And it was a typical A-framed house that included Millie and some other personal items, but it was his final and last. What we love and have to be so grateful to for Mrs. Bush is she did not want the gingerbread house to end. Hans Roffert was the executive chef at the White House, and when he hired Roland Mesnier, the pastry chef, he told Roland, "You will make every sweet for the White House, but you will not make the gingerbread house." The two were very close. When Hans Roffert retired, Roland didn't know how he felt about continuing to make a gingerbread house every year. So he and Mrs. Bush talked about it, and he agreed to make another gingerbread house as long as it wasn't the A-framed house that Hans Roffert had made before. So he of course had to make a snow village. And if you look very closely, what looks like Mrs. Claus walking out of the house is actually a replica of Mrs. Bush coming out with a tray full of cookies. Roland loved Mrs. Bush, and he would make all kinds of wonderful creations for her. For a breakfast she had, for holiday breakfast, he made this wonderful centerpiece you can see here. It looks like a Christmas ornament with a ribbon. What most people don't realize is that is all sugar. It was completely edible, and every guest that attended received a replica of their own filled with cream. Here's another close-up of it. You can see it has a picture of the White House on the front. Mrs. Clinton administration had a little bit of a different look. Gone are sort of the flock trees of the Reagan and Bush years, but you would see all sorts of wonderful colors during the Clinton era. Mrs. Clinton, if you look closely at the bottom of this tree skirt, you can see it sort of is an echoing of representing the entire country. She had a custom tree skirt made that was on display all 8 years while she was First Lady, representing every state and territory. And again, gone are the flock trees, but you see the beautiful reds. This is the East Colonnade, and you can see here on the far right side those boxes I was talking about with the Christmas cards that Mrs. Nixon had started collecting in her poinsettia tree. When the Marine Guards are posted outside the West Wing, you know the president is in the Oval Office. And here's a close-up of that tree skirt we were talking about with First Pet socks. And it really just was a wonderful tree skirt representing our entire nation. What I love most about the Clinton, here we see socks again, about the Clinton eras during Christmas is her relationship with Roland Mesnier. She basically gave him the freedom to do whatever he wanted as long as he continued the tradition of the gingerbread house. And this is when you see it really take off and become such an anticipated event with the media. It was still staying on the same state dining room table that Mrs. Nixon had put it on. His first year with the Clintons, he did a replica of the White House. It's one of his favorite gingerbread houses, and it included 21 different versions of First Pet socks dancing. The next year, he surprised the Clintons, and he had gotten pictures of President Clinton's childhood home and had an exact replica made on it that was complete with his German Shepherd laying on the front porch and a pie cooling in the window. The next year, he had Mrs. Clinton's home. you can see here. In that year, she had the theme, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." So he cut out the windows of her home, and in one bed you see the children snuggled up, and on the other window you would see the stockings hanging above the chimney with care. She would have artisans from throughout the country that were famous and not famous at the time. She would have Christopher Radko, Ralph Lauren. You would see the Council of Fashion Designers, the Society of Needle Pointers, you name it, and they would come to the White House during the Clinton administration and come help. The Society of Decorative Painters came a couple times. Here you see the Council of Fashion designers there. And the bottom one, you can see Kay Unger designed a suit for Mrs. Claus. And Mrs. Clinton was real funny during the media tour. She walked by and said, "I think Mrs. Claus is going to need to go on a diet." So, and here, that year, Roland Mesnier, and following the theme of a Santa's Workshop, created a Santa's Workshop gingerbread house. One of my most favorite years during her administration was 1999, Holiday Treasures. She did a lot for restoring buildings. And so every building that they had helped secure funding for, she put on display throughout the White House, little miniature replicas on mantles and pier tables. Here you can see a seated dinner in the Red Room. And that year, Roland Mesnier, doing Holiday Treasures, had Washington, D.C. made out of gingerbread. So you would see not only the White House, Mount Vernon, the Jefferson Memorial, and here you see the Washington Monument. The only thing that year that was not edible on display was the working red blinking light at the top of the Washington Monument. They were also really famous for this wonderful wreath. It was the largest and heaviest structure to ever be put on the White House. It weighed over 2,000 pounds. The artist that made this wonderful wreath had 1,500 lights on it. Each one was hand dipped in a blue gel to get the perfect presidential blue. He didn't want it to be, royal blue was not the right color, nor was navy, it was too dark. So everyone was hand dipped to make it this perfect blue. First Lady Laura Bush, as we know, was a librarian. And I really think those years of her being a librarian and school teacher gave her so many ideas for the holidays. For her first Christmas, they could not have had a more fitting theme. Every First Lady will tell you, or if you read their memoirs, will talk about one of their biggest surprises is following the president's inauguration. They would have a meeting with the White House chief usher and the florist and some others, and they would say, "And what would you like your Christmas theme to be?" A couple of the first ladies actually thought it was a joke since they were asking in January, but the truth of the matter is, really in January, they are starting to think about Christmas and what the next theme will be. And by the time the Easter egg roll has come and gone, Christmas is well ordered and on its way, and you can't change the theme. And for her first Christmas, she decided to have Home for the Holidays as a theme. And really, following the tragic events of 9/11, you could not have had a better theme that year at the White House. And it was a all-flocked white theme at the White House, celebrating our former president's homes. And she reached out to the governor of every state and asked him to pick local artisans to depict something of their home state, with the only requirement being that it was white. So here you see all these wonderful replicas of famous homes and other structures in the Blue Room tree. On the pier tables, she reached out to the executive resident staff, the electricians, the plumbers, and everybody, and asked if they would want to participate, and of course they did, and they made exact replicas from blueprints of many former presidents' homes, including Mount Vernon. Here you see Monticello. And the most Western example was LBJ's ranch. And if you were to go to the George W. Bush Library in Dallas, Texas today, they have all of these out on display. They've completely recreated the 2001 Christmas, and it's absolutely spectacular. For the gingerbread house that year, she did have a requirement for Chef Mesnier. She said he pretty much had the freedom to make it as big or however he wanted, but it had to always be a replica of the White House. So in keeping with the theme that year, he had the White House of 1800, and so you notice the Truman balcony is missing. Again, some more of the beautiful flock trees. In 2002, she celebrated all creatures, great and small, all the president's pets. I love this picture below Barbara Bush's portrait. You see a papier-mâché replica of Millie, Barbara Bush's famous presidential dog, and its puppy, Spot, who belonged to President and Mrs. George W. Bush. A little fun trivia, Spot is the only dog to live at the White House under 2 different administrations since she was born at the White House and then returned. Many of the executive resident staff, like Chef Mesnier, would say they were so excited to see their friend back at the White House. Here you see these wonderful poinsettia trees again. It was very much a red Christmas that year. And that year, Mrs. Bush reached out again to the governor of every state, asking him again to pick out a local artist to depict their local bird, or their state bird, to be on display in the Blue Room. And on the pier tables and mantels, again, more papier-mâché replicas. There you see the President and First Lady's pets, their cat India and their dogs, Spot and Barney. But you see some other favorites, like the Adams alligator, who reportedly lived in the East Room's bathtub. You see Nelson, George Washington's loyal horse. We see the Coolidge's raccoons, Rebecca and Reuben, just to name a few. Caroline Kennedy's famous pony, Macaroni. And here you see Chef Mesnier again at work. The centerpiece for the dessert table was, of course, America's wonderful eagle. That eagle spanned actually almost 5 feet across in width. Again, completely edible, all made out of chocolate and marzipan. Here you can see President George W. Bush, like his dad in his Oval Office, always had gingerbread cookies. So anyone lucky enough to meet him might get a cookie. In 2002, following the events of 9/11, the White House was largely shut down. You weren't seeing the candlelight tours. You weren't seeing many of the tours we had come to used to have at the White House. And it was really concerning to Mrs. Bush that the White House was not open for so many people to see. So she came up with one of the most popular things of all times, the Barney Cam. She did tons of media interviews and things letting the TV cameras into the White House, but they also put a video camera on their little dog Barney, had Barney run through the White House, so you really could, during the holidays, log on to the White House and see it at any time. All these wonderful images that not only Barney took, but some of the staff took, and it was one of the most successful web launches of all time. So I think it had 2 million hits on its debut. I'm sorry, 24 million views on the day it was hit. That's a big difference, but it was 24 million views. 2003, A Season of Stories. What I love most about this holiday is that it's very much like all of our own families. Mrs. First Lady Laura Bush, like her mother-in-law, Barbara Bush, cared a lot about literacy. And like many of us, will borrow ornaments from our family members. First Lady Laura Bush thought it would be great for Jenna and Barbara to borrow their grandmother's ornaments. And Barbara Bush thought it was a wonderful idea, so she called down to her presidential library in A&M. They had them pack up all these wonderful dolls that had been displayed on her first Christmas, and they returned to the White House. She had then, of course, added a candy motif to all the garlands and everything throughout the White House, and she had papier-mâché dolls created for all the pier tables again. And I love that she really used some of her favorites, like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, but then she included contemporary favorites of children today, like Harry Potter. So it was a wonderful reflection of new and old that Christmas. Again, the centerpiece for the dessert table made by Roland Mesnier, and it's the Chocolate Factory. And here you kind of see a little glimpse on the off-site facility where they're preparing for Christmas months in advance. The gingerbread house that year, they're just, pictures do not do justice when you look closely at all these little marzipan and chocolate victories, Jack and the Beanstalk, all these wonderful depictions. There you see the Cat in the Hat, Alice in Wonderland, replicas of all the children's classics. And here, I just love that picture, again, just giving us a glimpse of what it's like that weekend after Thanksgiving, setting up the White House for the holidays. 2005, All Things Bright and Beautiful, might be the most challenging Christmas the White House has ever faced. Everything was natural and fresh that year. It was absolutely breathtaking. The entire Blue Room was made of fresh lilies. The White House Florist Department developed a special way to wire on little test tubes onto the branches of the tree filled with water, and daily they would walk by the tree and replace the flowers as needed. The only exception would be the very top of the tree or the very back that required scaffolding to reach. Those were freeze-dried flowers. Otherwise, everything was fresh. One of my favorite stories was from the White House photographers that year. He said that the photographers typically would be one of the last ones to the staff party during the holidays because they were taking everybody's pictures. And so they never got to sit in the honored seats at the Blue Room during the holiday. And so that year, they devised a plan. And one or two of the photographers went, they secured those tables, everyone else took the pictures. But the male photographers said the fragrance was so overwhelming from those wonderful lilies, they could not eat their food and they had to get up and sit elsewhere. But it was in the ground floor corridor. You would see replicas of first pets or other animals made out of topiary ivies. And here it's a wonderful way to show you that when you're decorating at your own home, you're not required to use reds and greens. You can use any colors. So you see her white tulips with yellow lemons below Ladybird's portrait. Hot pinks, oranges, fuchsias. The sky's the limit when it comes to Christmas colors. And it's just beautiful. There you see that wonderful crush secured by Ladybird. It's still between the portraits of George and Martha Washington. Again, all of those tulips are real, so they were placed as needed. And here we do have a new White House pastry chef, Thaddeus Dubois. And of course, his gingerbread house includes Barney and Miss Beasley, the White House pets. Deck the Halls and Welcome All was inspired by the Red Room. It was sort of in honor of the Red Room at the White House. The palette was real simple with red and green, primarily red. Here we can see the filming of the Barney Cam. The story that I love from this Christmas has to do with the gingerbread house. Thaddeus Dubois has gone into the private sector, and Mrs. Bush has not selected a new pastry chef yet. So she called her old friend Roland Mesnier, who was more than happy to return to the White House during the Christmas season. And where the pastry chefs create this gingerbread house is they start working on it months in advance. Roland would sometimes start working in August on the marzipan figures. But they actually put it together in the China room of the White House. There's a little elevator off that hall, and so once it was finally put together, they put on a little cart, wheel it up the elevator. And that year, Roland was really excited to make another gingerbread house, and it was too big to fit on the elevator. So in the wee hours of the morning, he had to go outside, put the gingerbread house on a van, drive it around to the front entrance of the White House, and carry it in. And it was absolutely breathtaking. It included over 800 hand-piped snowflakes. It weighed over 300 pounds, again, of just gingerbread and dark chocolate and marzipan. And it was absolutely wonderful. It was a view of the south portico of the White House. Here you see the president's seat at a holiday party. Let's see if we can get it to click. 2007 Holiday in the National Park. What I like to show here is that we do have a new White House pastry chef who's still there today, Bill Yosis. He wanted to make his own mark on the White House gingerbread houses, however, and so he creates white chocolate houses, making them the most heaviest to date. Again, like Roland Mesnier, he oftentimes will use actual blueprints to create these gingerbread houses, but it was the most heaviest, weighing several hundred pounds, and you can just see the hours and the exactness of the bricks and everything for those gingerbread houses. They're absolutely fabulous. Again, we can't have a gingerbread house without including Barney and Miss Beasley. Celebrating the parks, he put all the animals you would find in our national parks down at the base. And here we see President Bush went in to go thank all the wonderful volunteers helping create the sweets that year and made a cookie for himself in the room. And you can see all the preparation there, some pieces of the gingerbread houses behind him. For their final Christmas in 2008, a red, white, and blue Christmas, they brought out all the things they had done their previous 7 years to be on display again. And it's just a wonderful patriotic theme. And I think we're going to show here a little bit of the Barney can I was telling you about earlier.
It's really great to have the whole family together like this.
It really is special.
In fact, Willard, I think these are the memories we're going to cherish most about our time in the White House.
Well, that, Willard, and when Barney decorates the whole house for the holidays.
Barney, what do you have in store this year?
Celebrate America. That's a great way to spend our last holiday here in the White House.
A real red, white, and blue holiday.
How very patriotic.
It seems like you'll be busy, Barney. You better get started.
So you can see here, every year the plots will become more involved and more detailed with the Barney Camp. We'd have special guests coming on every year. The Prime Minister came from England, came on one year. This year, a little bit later in the video, you would see the gold medalists from America from the Olympics that year come on. It was just a great way to really open up the doors to everyone across the world of the White House through the Barney Camp.
And as we return to the Summer Olympic Games, it's all up to this final vault by Barney. And he sticks the landing. Barney and Miss Beasley with their second synchronized dive. And it's a flawless performance. And of course, in lane 4, it's the heavy favorite, Barney. And as they come down to the wire, it's Barney closing. And it's Barney by a paw. All right, so back here at the
So you see there, they'll have different people. If you recognize these nutcrackers from her previous Christmas were dressed up as Uncle Sam's. You would see this wonderful red, white, and blue Santa welcoming you when you enter the hall. And on here, you can barely see them, but in the pier tables, these are the wonderful replicas of the president's 2001 houses. And just red, white, and blue everywhere intertwined in the garlands. It was really special. She sent the exact same ball to every congressional district, all the congressmen and the senators that year, and had them pick a local artist to depict it. You would see famous ones such as James Avery, K. Bailey Hutchinson picked. Right here in the middle, you see for Virginia's first, Eric Cantor of Virginia went to a children's hospital and picked a local child that was battling brain cancer to depict his district. So it was wonderful to see the different artisans. There's James Avery I was telling you about earlier. And it just made for a beautiful blue room tree. Here you see the Oval Office tree. In the State Dining Room, and that wonderful portrait of Lincoln. Here you get a little glimpse of the Chief of Staff's tree. He reportedly loved Harley Davidson, so it was a Harley Davidson themed tree. And you see the wonderful white chocolate gingerbread house with the fife and drum. Again, those marzipan and chocolate figures. The Obamas entered the White House, and her first theme was Reflect, Rejoice, and Renew. It made for a beautiful blue room tree with this wonderful stately yellow ribbon running all the way through it. She had over 800 ornaments from previous administrations on display that year at the White House. Many of them were sent to local community centers throughout the country, and they were asked to be depicted representing their home state and different areas they were sent to. The cranberry tree is no longer put up every year, but here you do see they are honoring the tradition of the cranberry tree in the Red Room with a cranberry garland that was beautiful. And of course, what's a Christmas without a first pet? So you see Bo, their new puppy at the White House. And here you see President Obama's tree in the Oval Office. The next year, she had simple gifts as her theme. She wrote, the greatest blessings of all are ones that don't cost a thing. The time that we spend with our loved ones, the freedoms we enjoy as Americans, and the joy we feel from reaching out to those in need. And that was honor of her theme, Simple Gifts. You see, you still have that wonderful tradition of the Blue Room tree being delivered to the White House, and the Blue Room tree here close up with this magnificently huge tree skirt. Of course, you see the dogs are going to start making Bo starting to make a much bigger appearance this year. Here you see some members of the military seeing the tree for the first time. And this year, she started doing these wonderful things. When you enter the White House as a visitor, you can write a note to the military, and they would make sure it was delivered to bases throughout the country and outside of the country to Iraq, Afghanistan, and everywhere else they might be stationed. And it's something that still goes on today. And of course, here we're talking about Bo. Bo is starting to become quite popular, and here you see a replica made out of 40,000 pipe cleaners. Cookies made of replicating Bo. Here you see the white chocolate house with Susie Morrison, one of the pastry chefs who's been there for many years. And of course, Bo is a huge display there as usual. And here you can see the final touches being put on it in the China room like we were talking about. The president again in the Oval Office with trees both inside and outside. Apologize for my voice, it's that time of year. In 2011, the theme was Shine, Give, and Share. And here's a little video they're doing. Bo was sort of the hidden theme that year. There were 8 replicas of Bo.
This is the littlest bow that we have out of we're doing 5 this year, and this is the littlest bow, and he's completely made out of buttons and beads and a few little sequins. And there's one little special heart-shaped button right here on his heart. It started out where I coated him with a special kind of Gorilla Tape. So that's over top of a chicken wire frame. Then I sort of hand glued every single one of these on. And as you can see, I built out the face a little bit and the way that his mouth is from the chicken wire to look a little bit more like how Bo is in real life. You can see there's certain sequins, sort of like little shines on him, which I think will be nice, and that I think the people will enjoy him a lot. So we have so many bows this year, all different kinds and shapes. We have this one right here I'm working on as we speak. I'm knitting trash bag bow, we call him. He does not have his eyes yet, but he will have eyes. Then we have marshmallow and licorice bow. This is marshmallow and licorice bow. And he is very heavy. Compared to what he was, this licorice is weighing him down. So he's glued in the same idea. And there will be a third one of this little set of babies, and that will be completely out of pom-poms. And our final one, the biggest one, is felt, an all felt bow that is 4.5 feet tall. I measured him myself.
There's nothing more popular than a White House pet. This year, the theme is 2013 is Gather Around. It's a wonderful theme at the White House. And when you first enter, you see this wonderful tree paying tribute to the Gold Star families, those that have lost a loved one in service to the country. And so those are what all the Gold Stars are representing. And again, when you first thing you can do when you enter the White House, you can write a note to a service member, and they are delivering them throughout the world. We go on down the colonnade, and you see on the right would be those Christmas cards we've talked about, on the left, all of the wreaths and stained glass windows. Here you can see a Christmas tree made of library books, and you see a lot more replicas of First Pets, Bo and Sunny. The tails are actually moving this year. Ground floor corridor, and we see the library room trimmed for the holidays. China room. Here we see the crush we've been talking about. Lots of different colors were used throughout the house this year. The green room, the blue room, paying tribute again, following Mrs. Nixon's tradition, representing the entire country. And the military, very red, white, and blue. And again, we do not have the cranberry tree yet, but there were cranberries used in the decor that year. And the state dining room this year, the gingerbread house is not just a gingerbread house. It actually has a gingerbread fireplace holding it up, paying tribute to FDR and his fireside chats this year. A close-up, it includes Bo and Sunny, of course. And here you exit through the doors on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I have a little video at the end, and I like to always leave people with this wonderful quote written from the 60s about walking through the White House during the holidays. As you leave the White House, there is a feeling with you that you have touched history. You have brushed up against it. You are richer for it. Christmas especially seems to be an appropriate and sentimental time to view the White House. As you leave, you feel a little more confident than when you went in about the future of this country and the men who make its history. For the White House has a secret to impart, and that secret is the strength of continuity.
Our finest gifts we bring, to lay before the King, So to honor Him, when we come. Little baby, I am a poor boy too, I have no gift to bring, that's fit to give our King, Shall I play for you, on my drum, on my drum? I play my drum for Mary nodded, the ox and lamb kept time, I played my drum for him, I played my best for him, Then he smiled at me, in my drum. When we come, in my drum.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, we do have questions. Time for a few questions tonight. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll come around to you with the microphone. Do we have any tonight? Come on, there's got to be a few.
Yes, sir.
How did you get all the photos?
Lots and lots of research. Some are actually photos from first family members. Some are from presidential libraries. Some are actually from the DC Public Archives in the a newspaper division. There used to be a newspaper called the Washington Star. It's no longer in print, but they always had a wonderful social section, covering the White House. And it really was interesting. The first couple of years, one of the challenges was you would read a press release and it might not match up quite with the photograph. And we didn't have computers during the early years we were covering in this book. So you'd really have to do lots of interviews with different people that were there and then compare it with the photographs in newspaper and magazine reports. So we came across some great images. Yes, sir.
Hello. I've always been really fascinated by presidential pets. I was wondering, out of all the research you've done, which one of the pets was your favorite?
Oh, that's not fair. You are so sweet to let me plug, though. I will give pets at the White House. That's really tough. A lot of people will say there was no greater champion of White House pets than Millie, Barbara Bush's dog. Roland Mesnier would tell you that is the only true presidential pet. She was presidential to the core. She would never bark, and she would walk perfectly behind Mrs. Bush. And it really is fun. You'd see pictures of her in the book sitting at a state dinner behind Barbara Bush, and she would just give her a little pet on the head from time to time during a state dinner. What I love about the Christmas book and the pet books is they really do reflect many of the first families. For the Christmas book, you have an introduction written by every living First Lady, Tricia Nixon for the Nixon administration. And with the pet book, you have, here's a portrait of Barbara Bush with Millie, but we have a quote from all the first family members. We actually have Betty Ford's last public quote. It said, "Liberty was Jerry's favorite advisor. She gave him something no one else could share." Until recently, I've always had a golden retriever, so Liberty was a favorite. And we talked about President Nixon's dogs, and of course, Nixon is most famous for Checkers, but what most people do not realize is that Checkers never actually lived in the White House. That was their pet as vice president. So lots of fun there. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Contact your local congressional office, and they can set you up with a tour. And they can. And I just went through recently, and it was a lot of fun. That was actually my redhead dropping her little note to the military in the mailbox. And we even got a presidential pet sighting. Bo and Sonny walked through while we were there. But definitely contact your congressional office, and they can set you up with a tour. Sadly, they're not candlelight tours like Mrs. Nixon's with real candles, but there are lots of tours still available.
I thank you.
Yes.
You said that Mrs. Ford began the tradition of the cranberry tree. Can you tell me, is there any information as to why or what the significance of the cranberries was to her?
It was really in honor of that year's Christmas with the Williamsburg Christmas. Much of the decor that year was strings of popcorn and other things, so it really matched the theme. And there was a lady from Chestertown, Maryland, who came up with it. And in the book, they actually will tell you exactly how to create one. And it was a neat tradition for many, many years, but it wasn't something they set out to start that tradition. It was something that Mrs. Ford liked so much. They did it the next year, and it seemed to just go on. And of course, I think I said it was Nancy Reagan's favorite. Yes, ma'am.
Are these your first books?
Yes, ma'am.
When did the ornaments start, and did you say they raise money with those ornaments for some organization?
The White House Historical Association creates an ornament every year. That started during the Reagan administration. And those ornaments, you can purchase them at many presidential libraries, you can purchase them online or through the White House Historical Association. They raise money for the White House. Now, the actual ornaments in the White House are different. They are created by volunteers and part of the White House budget. And really, most of the time, they'll go back to presidential libraries. Lady Bird Johnson's final year, President Johnson actually purchased them as a present to Lady Bird so that she could keep them. The Kennedy ornaments, everyone's not sure exactly where all of those are, but sometimes they return with first families. And then like the Nixons, they left there, so they were on the trees for many, many years.
We have a question here from Facebook that you sort of talked about, but maybe you could elaborate. White House usher Clem Conger said that Pat Nixon restored the executive mansion to its golden age. And what specifically, why so?
I think she did. I think I'd mentioned before, it went from the White House went from being just 1/3 historically furnished to 2/3 by the time she left. That is an acquisition of over 600 pieces. No administration since has been able to acquire that many pieces for the White House. And it's absolutely amazing what they were able to do.
Are there any other questions out there? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just so you all know, Mrs. Pickens is going to be signing her book, Christmas at the White House, which is available for sale as you make your way out. She's going to be signing right up in the lobby. Also, in case, to your point about the White House ornaments, we do have the 2013 White House Christmas ornament for sale in the gift shop. So thank you very much. And here, our gift This one-of-a-kind, lavish, and it's available in the gift shop. What would Nixon do mug?